Hello, everyone. It's me, Tim. Today I want to talk to you about neutral factions. I can't keep talking like that. I want to talk about neutral factions because I think they're really interesting and it's a fun Friday. And this is really a talk on narrative design, which I'm not an expert on, but I'm good at coming up with narrative ideas as long as I work with really good narrative designers who can then write way better than I can. And also I want to, admit I know alignment is over. All the new games coming out are like alignment is so 1980s. But I want to talk about good and evil and how it's used narratively. You don't have to have an alignment bar or an alignment graph or an alignment cube in your game to still have factions in your game world that skew good or evil. And the first thing I just want to say is good and evil has been done to death. Games just use these good and evil tropes over and over again. I specifically want to call out cartoony evil, and you all know what I'm talking about. It's the villain is like, I'm going to take over the world, and then it will be dark and smoky, and people will be crying a lot. Or I'm not going to call out the movie, but you have this thing which is the personification of evil. And do you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to make this little girl float and vomit soup because scary. It's like, okay, bitch, please. One of my games, the world got nuked. It's not scary anymore that you can levitate and throw up. In fact, I don't even get why the throwing up part is scary. Anyway, evil, especially in video games, just seems so incredibly watered down and worse, talkative. Every evil villain has to give a soliloquy on why he did what he did and what he's gonna do. And it just, after a while, I'm just like, are we gonna have another one of these evil villains? And don't get me started on good. Good is overused almost as much as evil. And there's lawful stupid is a meme for a reason. A lot of these good factions are usually portrayed as really dumb. And even when they're not dumb, they're usually seen as overly rigid, forgetting that lawful good isn't the only kind of good, there's chaotic good. But even then, they're often seen as like, well, I gotta do this thing because I'm good. Not knowing that, taking into account where sometimes there's a greater good and all that. But let's throw all that out, because I think all of those, you can think of many, many games that you've played, and many, many more that you haven't, that have already portrayed good and evil in those overly trope ways. The thing I want to point out here is if you're a narrative designer, if you want to have good and evil factions that will work with any player build, because I'm a huge proponent of providing blank slate players, letting the player not only decide how they want to play the game, but frequently what their history is. What were they doing before the game started? And now these good and evil factions have to still have a reason for wanting to work with the player, despite those builds. Like, why would evil work with a good priest, a priest of a good god? Good god. I've seen the tropes of, we're secretly using them, or we've tricked them into doing the very thing we want them to do. Again. But the flip side is even harder to justify, which is why would good folks work with a player who's a psychopath? And not just in their history, but it's like actively going around and just murdering everybody. Or why would you work with someone whose background is made a deal with the devil? I'm looking at you, Arcanum. I mean, some of these good factions should have been, wait a minute, you're that guy. Now, you can come up with reasons. You can bend over backwards and come up with all these narrative reasons why these good and evil factions would still do what they effectively want to do with this player. But you have to. That's my whole point of this, is you're going to have to do that. And hopefully you're going to have to do that in some new and original way. And what I'm saying is, you don't always have to. You can have neutral factions, truly neutral factions in your game. And you can do all kinds of fun things with them. There's a whole bunch of nuance. That's my word. To do neutral factions. There are so many types, and they all lead to very interesting factions. So I'm going to talk about doing neutral factions 4 ways. This is one of my checklist videos. You can, if you're making a game, you can refer back to this and go, what's another way I can come up with a neutral faction? So I'm going to talk about 4 different ways you can come up with a neutral faction. The first neutral faction. This is a faction that has decided not to take sides. They're not choosing a group they support or a group they oppose, and they do this before whatever the events are, and they do it afterwards. Basically, they're just like, leave me alone. And there's a whole bunch of reasons they can do this. So I can give you a whole bunch of examples of factions you could make who use this as their neutrality. The first one, maybe they were just weak. They're a weak faction, like hobbits. Hobbits are portrayed that way. They stayed out of the affairs of the bigger folk. Or maybe just farmers, farm folk. They're just like, look, I'm just trying to grow my crops. I don't want to fight in anyone's war. I don't want to pick a side. Just leave us alone. There's other groups, too, that are just aloof. They feel like there's no reason for them to even get involved. Dwarves are frequently like that. They just stay in their underground cities, mine for gold and gems and all that, and just ignore what's going on. Conversely, there are wizards, and they just want to do their research or whatever they're doing in those towers that are in there, all those obscure areas. Both of you just want to say, I'm aloof. I'm not part of this. Don't make me a part of this. Then there are people who are really, really powerful, so they feel like they shouldn't step in. Elves, especially groups of elves, sometimes fall into this faction. Gods frequently fall into that faction. They're basically saying, we're not going to get involved in the affairs of mortals. You guys do whatever you want to do. Don't get us involved in this. Sometimes, though, it's a philosophy thing. It's the philosophy of I won't take sides. Monks. Scribes may go, I'm going to follow what's going along so I can write the history of this, but I'm not taking sides. Maybe it's greed. Maybe the reason they're not taking sides is because they just want to sell to both sides. A lot of merchants whack this way. They're like, look, I'm just a caravan. I'm just selling food and clothing and armor and weapons, and I'll sell it to anybody who has money, anybody who has gold. And then finally, there's apathy. You may just have a group that literally does not care. They don't care what the fight's about. They don't care which side wins. That's why they're not helping. And while a lot of this can skew into the sarcastic NPCs that I hate so much, it can also be done as a, look, I'm over this. In the past, I've taken sides. I'm not doing this anymore. You're not dragging me in to your petty little argument of the year. Or you can just have someone who goes, look, I don't have a stake in this. I don't want to get involved because it doesn't affect me in any way. I have no stakes. I'm not getting involved. I'm done. So that's a whole bunch of ways of just doing the first type of neutrality, which are groups that don't want to take a side. Then you have the neutral group that stays neutral before and during the event, because what they're doing is they're waiting to see who wins, because their plan is just to get along with whoever wins. You can view this as a survival of the fittest mechanism, but a lot of times games will have not merchants but guilds, merchant guilds and other guilds. They work this way because they're so involved politically and they really can't stay out forever. They wait to see which side is winning, and then they ingratiate themselves to that side. It's a form of neutrality, but it's I'll wait and see who wins, and then I'll throw my hat in the ring after the match is over. Then there's another side, a third type of neutrality, which I'll call balanced. This is the group that doesn't want either side to ever have the upper hand. These are people who frequently support the underdog, the downtrodden, the oppressed, the people they feel are on the losing side. It's kind of the opposite of the previous kind of neutrality, because you're not going with the survival of the fittest. You're siding with, you don't want to side with the winner. You see who's losing and you help them now. Druids are often portrayed as that kind of neutrality, especially in D&D, because they fight for the underdogs. They fight for nature. They fight for the forest can't fight for itself against logging, and these animals cannot defend themselves against man, so they fight against that. But in general, they're true neutral, and they don't want to take sides. They just want to keep everything in balance. And then there's the fourth side of neutrality, which is going to sound evil, but I don't think it is. This is the faction of neutral people who are just like, you know what? We'd be a lot better if we just wiped out both sides, the good side and the evil side. These are neutrals who are tired of being on the sidelines, who are tired of being used, who are tired of always being dragged into this good versus evil thing. They're like, I'm tired of it. It's BS from both sides. The world would be a lot better if we just wiped out all of them. No more angels, no more demons. Just get rid of anybody who's too extreme. It's a form of balance, like the third one, but it's not quite the same. I'm trying to think if I've ever seen anything like this in a game. I mean, Sigil is kind of like that in the plane of concordance in D&D, but I'm not sure I've ever seen a game that's been based around something. Maybe the TV show Supernatural, where the Winchesters just get mad of all the angels and demons and vampires and werewolves and everybody fighting all the time. But it would be interesting to see a game with that form of neutral faction in it, where they're just tired of all this philosophical bickering, and they're like, anyone who picks a side is getting wiped out. It's in a very aggressive form of neutrality. So there, I think I've talked enough for a Fun Friday. There's a bunch of neutral faction ideas that you can make that are neutral for different reasons, and you can come up with different ways they can be neutral within those reasons. All of them can claim to be neutral. None of them are the same as each other. You could even see some of these neutral factions being opposed to each other. Like the ones that want survival of the fittest are definitely against the ones that want to support the underdog. But all of them can claim neutrality. And the best part, none of them need any narrative reasons to work with the player. They've already got their own reason for getting involved, and the player can be involved in that or opposed to it or whatever, but the faction ultimately portrays itself as neutral. So that's why they wouldn't be immediately opposed to the player when the player stops by. And if the player wants to work with them, they can, no matter what the player's own background or choices that they've made. So I think this works really well. Just some food for thought. Hopefully a fun Friday.